return tickets at greatly reduced prices. Details can be seen on the back of the seat in front of you or in the cruise brochures which are available on board. The bus ticket is valid for 24 hours from the time it is presented to the bus driver, and it also entitles you to further cost reductions on any future city sightseeing tours worldwide. The nearest bus stop is close to our moorings. Any crew member will be happy to provide additional information. In the downstairs lounge there is a fully stocked bar, together with hot drinks and snacks. This service will be available to passengers as soon as the fares are collected. Also for your convenience, toilets are available in the area close to where you boarded the vessel. Today you're cruising on the River Dee aboard the Jackie. Built in 1970, it operated on the River Ouse in York under the name River Countess. Following its purchase by Chester Boat in 2007, the vessel was renamed the Jackie, in memory of the late Jackie Leach, a local lady, who worked tirelessly caring for Chester's swan population. The River Dee rises in the mountains of Snowdonia in North Wales, just to the west of Lake Ballard. After flowing northeastward along a broad valley to Corban, it plunges down the beautiful vale of Llangollen before leaving the Welsh foothills near Bangor-on-Dee. It then meanders northwards through the Cheshire Plain before eventually swinging northwestward at Chester. After flowing over the Chester Weir, then under the Old Dee Bridge, it then progresses another 18 miles along the Dee estuary, finally discharging into the Irish Sea. Although not particularly long, at approximately 80 miles, the River Dee today proudly represents an internationally famous example of advanced water management. In simple terms, water is stored in reservoirs during periods of heavy rainfall, and then released back into the river by controlled sluice gates, thus supplementing the natural low flows and permitting constant extraction, while still maintaining a reasonably constant volume of water in the river. By these means, almost 200 million gallons can be extracted daily by 5 water authorities, while still allowing approximately 80 million gallons to flow onwards to the sea. This process was initially set up in the early 19th century to allow a constant supply of water to the local canal system. Thomas Telford, the Scottish engineer, famous for his canal, road and bridge building expertise, was the forerunner in this endeavour, and although today the system is much modernised, nonetheless the same principles are still applied. During your cruise today, you may see mallard ducks, waterfowl such as moorhens and coots, herons, cormorants and swans. In the UK, all swans belong to the reigning monarch. The most common type to be found on the river is the mute swan, the largest native British bird, with a wingspan of more than 6 feet. In 1974, there were approximately 100 swans at Chester, but during the 1980s, their numbers almost vanished due to lead poisoning, nest vandalism, and injuries sustained from human litter. By the late 1990s, 20 to 30 breeding pairs had returned to the river, but today, sadly, the numbers have once again diminished. Recent evidence suggests that, for whatever the reason, the swans have possibly just relocated for a while to the nearby canals, lakes, and other local rivers close to Chester. If you're really lucky today, you may even see a black cormorant on the riverside or standing on the weir. Should it have its wings fully outstretched, then it has probably just eaten and is now digesting its meal. What you are unlikely to see is exactly what's in the river. There used to be 2 main types of fishing on the river, both under license of course. Below the weir, in the lower reaches of the river, salmon fishing was undertaken commercially for decades. In common with most rivers on the western coast of the British Isles, the River Dee at one time saw huge numbers of salmon returning regularly to spawn upstream. In 1997, for example, the salmon were so numerous during their return to the sea after spawning that some mistakenly leapt into many of the rowing boats at the quayside. Of course, being good upstanding citizens, the crew returned them to the river, thus allowing them to continue their journey. In more recent times, the National Environment Agency bought up all the traditional fishing concessions in order to preserve fish stocks, thus ending commercial salmon fishing below the weir. In more recent times, the National Environment Agency bought up all the traditional fishing concessions in order to preserve fish stocks, thus ending commercial salmon fishing below the weir. Above the weir, coarse fishing still takes place using rod and line. The River Dee is home to many fish, including the likes of chub, perch, roach, dace, bream, pike, and salmon, of course. On the subject of boating, I'll bet that not many of you are aware that Chester holds the distinction of having the oldest regatta in the country. In 1814, more than 10,000 people lined the riverbanks for a regatta in celebration of the defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte. The following year he escaped from captivity and regathered his scattered forces, only to suffer another devastating defeat at the Battle of Waterloo. Naturally, Chester celebrated once more with yet another regatta. Cambridge held its first regatta in 1829, whilst Henley-on-Thames, generally regarded as Britain's principal international rowing event, only held its first regatta in 1813. For the moment, ladies and gentlemen, there will be a short break in the commentary until the commencement of the return part of the cruise, after which point some of the more interesting views from the river will be outlined, hopefully, for your further enjoyment. As the vessel turns to begin the return part of your cruise, take note of the large white building with the very long window. It is known as Carlton Villa. It was the site of a Roman villa almost 2,000 years ago, and it's still possible to see part of its base below the modern foundations. Further upstream is a stretch of water, known locally for quite obvious reasons as the Long or Straight Nile. Many British rivers do not have stretches quite like this, and consequently many international rowing teams, including the junior members of the British national squad, regularly visit here for practice. A little further beyond the straight section, the river begins to twist and turn, eventually passing through the estate of the Duke of Westminster. The family's name is Grosvenor, and the present Duke owns some 11,000 acres here just south of the city. His home is known as Eaton Hall and has been a family possession since the 15th century. The original Grosvenors were actually kinsmen of William the Conqueror himself, and as Norman Earls, they control most of the land around Chester. Today, not only are they the biggest landowners in Chester, but also in London, with properties in areas such as Grosvenor Square, Belgravia and Mayfair. A little further on, note the large apartment block. Built in 1979, it is known as Riverside Court. From 1868 until the 1970s, this was the site of another public housing project known as the White House Hotel. The hotel provided rowing boats for hire, and it too ran a ferry service until the onset of the Second World War. Along Riverside Court, and continuing for quite some distance on the right-hand side, look out for some Riverside Wood cottages, which were once part of the property of the large houses to the rear. Over the years, many of these Riverside holdings have been sold off. Prices vary considerably depending on their size and quality, but are quite expensive, considering that the owners cannot live in them, and insurance is difficult because of the likelihood of flooding. Now turning to the left-hand side and far away in the distance, you will soon be able to see part of the city skyline. To begin with, look out for the four turrets atop our majestic cathedral. Originally, this was the site of a 7th century Saxon minster, but following the arrival of William the Conqueror in the 11th century, the first Norman Earl of Chester, Hugh d'Avranches, authorized the building of an abbey here in 1092. In 1540, along came Henry VIII, and in order to divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, he split with the Church of Rome and made himself head of the newly formed Church of England. From this point on, Chester's Abbey became its cathedral. In 1992, Chester celebrated its 900th anniversary, firstly as an abbey and then as a cathedral. Queen Elizabeth II herself joined Chester's celebrations by granting Lord Mayor status to the city in recognition of its historical importance. Since 1228 we've had a mayor, now we have a Lord Mayor. Just to the left of the cathedral, note the tall pointed tower standing high above Chester's Town Hall, seat of local government since it was built in 1869. Very much in the style of William Belfast, when only 29 years of age. Still on the left-hand side, but sweeping well to the right, you will notice a tall chimney. This is Chester's lead shot tower. This tower was built in 1799 to provide lead shot, otherwise known as musket balls, primarily for use as ammunition in the Napoleonic Wars. Although a number of such towers were built at this time, Chester's Tower remains not only as the oldest of the 3 remaining towers in the UK, but as a reminder of those far-off days. I'm sure you will have noticed that for quite some time we have been travelling around a long bend in the river. In the 11th century, the land on the left-hand side was actually an island, known in those days as an eyot or eye, and was owned by the Norman Earls. When the last Earl died without an heir in 1237, the land passed to the Crown and was eventually sold off. Today it's a water meadow prone to winter flooding, and just as in medieval times is still referred to as the Earl's Eye. Returning once more to the right-hand side, one can't help but notice the large castle-type building set back in the trees. It is known as Elmore Hill, and was originally built as the retirement home of a very famous Chester Victorian architect by the name of John Douglas. He was responsible for more than 400 buildings in and around the city, and was particularly noted for his splendid chimneys, some resembling sticks of varnish. By far his most famous piece of work is the marvellous wrought iron framework supporting Chester's beautiful clock astride the East Gate, the symbol of Chester throughout the world. Building work started on Elmore Hill in 1898, but unfortunately was still not quite finished by the time of John Douglas's death in 1911. This particular stretch of the river is known as Dee Ford, and was the site of a Roman ford way back in the 1st century AD. It's quite shallow here even today, and it's still possible to walk across at this point without getting one's hair wet. Now in view on the right-hand side is a splendid 19th century cream building with a red roof. Once the residence of a wealthy Victorian family, it is now divided into self-contained apartments. Many of the buildings from this point on were constructed around the mid-19th century, in most cases for the well-to-do people of the day. The railways came to Chester in the 1840s and tourism started to boom. The city also became a fashionable centre for the rich and famous, many of whom chose to build their houses in the suburbs. This particular area, known as Boughton, approximately 1 mile from the city centre, was just one of them. Today, many of the buildings have been split into apartments or taken over by various business concerns. This suburb was also very significant 2,000 years ago. The Romans of the day discovered natural water springs in the vicinity and pumped their supplies into the city by means of lead pipes and an aqueduct. Our modern city today takes some of its water supply from this. Should the lady subsequently drown, then she would be deemed innocent and already on her way to heaven. However, should she survive this ordeal, then she would be declared guilty, taken from the barrel and transferred to a place of execution, where she would then be hanged. Clearly a classic no-win situation. Just a little distance beyond the church, look out for an overgrown, uncultivated area known as Hangman's Hill. This was the place where such executions were carried out. A little known fact is that 15% of those executed were actually men. It is still consecrated land and is unlikely to be built upon in the foreseeable future. From the 13th to the 17th century, some 300,000 unfortunates suffered similar deaths throughout Europe. The last such trials in England were in 1712. For many years this was also the site of more general public executions, the last one being in 1801, when John Clare, a young man in his 20s, was convicted of stealing and brought here in chains to await hanging. Having escaped from custody, he then drowned trying to swim across the river to safety. Nonetheless, he was dragged from the river and hanged anyway. The whole gory process took well over an hour and caused such revulsion that public executions on this spot stopped forthwith. However, they still continued elsewhere in the city until 1866, and in Britain as a whole stopped completely 2 years later in 1868. Just ahead on the right-hand side, and partially hidden by the huge trees, look out for the very tall red brick building, in appearance just like a fairy tale castle. This was once the home of the author Thomas Hughes, who amongst other literary works wrote Tom Brown's School Days. Published in 1856, it recounted some of his experiences at Rugby School. As a member of the legal profession, he moved to Chester in 1882 as a county court judge, and had this beautiful mansion built overlooking the river, where he lived until his death in 1896. Buffington House was named after the town in Berkshire, where he was born in 1822. Now look out for what appear to be some lovely Georgian buildings on the right-hand side. Known as Diva Terrace, they were actually built by the Victorians. Diva was the name given to the city 2,000 years ago by the Romans, in honor of the Celtic goddess of this very same River Dee on which you are now sailing. We now come to Grosvenor Park on the right-hand side. This 20-acre plot of land was given to the people of Chester in the 1860s by Richard Grosvenor, the second Marquess of Westminster. I'm sure that many of you will be surprised to know that the very first public park in the world was laid out in Birkenhead, a town north of here just across the River Mersey from Liverpool. It was landscaped in 1847 by Joseph Paxton, that very same architect responsible for London's Crystal Palace Gardens, laid out for the Great Exhibition of 1851. His pupil Edward Kemp designed Chester's Park in 1867. Very shortly, on the right-hand side, you will see some of Chester's premier rowing clubs on view. The Royal Chester, formed in 1838, is one of the oldest in the UK. The King's School, formed in 1887, is also the oldest school in Chester. The king in question was Henry VIII, and following the dissolution of the abbey, a school was founded in 1541 in the newly formed cathedral, initially for the education of 24 poor and penniless boys. By 1960, the school had expanded significantly, causing a move to new premises just south of the city. In 2003, the school became fully co-educational. Beyond the Boathouse Inn, dating from 1850, is the Grosvenor Rowing Club, formed in 1869, using the family name of the Duke of Westminster, whose estate lies further upstream. The large buildings on the left-hand side were built from the mid to late 19th century, once again for the well-to-do people of the day. Nowadays, many have been converted into nursing homes and the like. With the arrival of the railways in the mid-19th century, so people flocked to the city. Many of the rich people naturally chose to live in the suburbs next to the river, just like the area of Queen's Park on the left. And in 1852, a suspension bridge was built as a pedestrian linkage of the city. The present bridge replaced the original in 1923. Some of you may have seen or heard of Brown's department store in the city. Founded by Susanna Brown in the late 18th century, it later went on to become one of the best shops in the north of England. It was this same family who in the 1880s provided funds for necessary restoration work and the planting of the grove of lime trees, which you can see all along the right-hand side of the river. Today the area is simply known as the Groves. On the left-hand side, immediately opposite the landing stage where you boarded the vessel, look out for a very large building with classical pillars. It was originally built in Neo-Georgian style in 1937 as the headquarters of the Army's Western Command. The Army moved out in 1997 and the building is now part of the city's university complex. Its reputation as a distinguished training college since 1839 led to university status being granted in 2005. In the distance, note the Old Dee Bridge. Built in the 14th century, it replaced a number of partly wooden structures washed away in high floods and tides. There is recent archaeological evidence that parts of its base on the downstream side are of Roman origin. A tower on the left-hand side was demolished in the 1780s. In 1826, the structure was widened for pedestrian traffic, and in 1886, tolls were finally abolished. Just before the bridge is the weir. Built by the Norman Earls of Chester in the 11th century, it served two main purposes. Firstly, to keep a constant depth of water above the weir, and secondly, to provide water power for their corn mills, situated along the right-hand side of the river, just beyond the bridge. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have time for. On behalf of Chester Boat, I would like to thank you all for sailing with us today. If you have enjoyed the cruise and commentary, then why not tell your friends? And if possible, please let us know on Chester Boat's social media channels. I also hope that you continue to enjoy the rest of your stay in Chester. On a final note, could I please ask you all to remain seated until the vessel is firmly and safely tied up on the landing stage.
What we're going to do next. Yeah. Fortunately, you've got it tonight as well.